And while Paul Keating has openly attacked the party he once used to lead, again, this time slamming Foreign Minister Penny Wong for trying to rattle the China can at ASEAN. Labor ministers have today lashed Keating for his comments.
Look, he's entitled to his views. I don't lose sleep over it, but I would say this: it was a new position to be lectured about the country of whether or not I understood the country of my birth in Malaysia. But as I said, he's entitled to it.
This is a woman who, over the last 2 years, has made up for years and years of neglect. She's doing a fantastic job. So when it comes to a difference of opinion between Paul and Penny, I go for Penny any day.
I think Paul is wrong about Penny.
On Penny Wong, I think quite clearly he's wrong.
Keating also accused ASIO boss Mike Burgess of trying to undermine the Albanese government's effort to stabilise relations with China. Joining me now is Labor MP Daniel Molino and Nationals leader David Littleproud. Good to be with you all tonight. Thank you so much for joining us. Daniel, we'll start with you, of course. What do you make of Paul Keating's comments today on Penny Wong?
Oh, hi, Danica. It's good to be here. So, look, I'll just say Paul Keating was a hero of mine, and he was really a big part of the inspiration for me joining Young Labor back during the Hawke Keating years, which unfortunately reflects my age. And I'm speaking on the superannuation objective bill when we go to Parliament next. So his legacy is huge. On this issue, I don't agree with him, and I think Penny has actually achieved a great deal in the last 18 months in stabilising our relationship with China. And I think there's been really constructive conversations during ASEAN. I, in fact, think it's amazing that we have a full complement of heads of state and national rulers here for ASEAN. It's really good for our country. So I don't agree with them on that. But look, there's lots that he's contributed to the country over a very long period.
David, Keating accused the foreign minister of rattling the China can. Why is he defending China so staunchly, do you think?
Well, look, I don't want to get into Paul Keating's comments. I don't necessarily agree with him hardly any of the time, but it's probably been nearly 30 years since he's last had a national security intelligence briefing. And I think it's important that if you're going to make commentary on something as important as that, you actually have the facts and you actually have the intelligence briefings behind you. I don't think it's helpful for a former Prime Minister to delve into this, particularly as something as sensitive as this, and that goes to the heart of our national security. I think you have a responsibility. It's a great privilege to become, and an honour, an achievement to become a Prime Minister of this country. But once you leave office, I think it's important you live up to the responsibility that you've been given and comment only when you have the facts in front of you. And the fact that I don't think Paul Keating would have seen any shred of evidence of an intelligence briefing for nearly 30 years doesn't make him an expert to be able to commentate. And I think that that comes with a responsibility that should adhere to into the future.
Yeah, a fair point. Now, in some breaking news this evening, Bankwest will transition to a digital-only bank by October this year, with 45 banks to close in October. David, I mean, the Nationals have been quite vocal about this for some time, and now it's been confirmed. What sort of an impact do you think this is going to have?
Yeah, in fact, the CEO, Matt Comyn, rang me only a few minutes ago to explain the situation. He made it clear in the Senate inquiry that we initiated around branch closures that this was going to happen with Bankwest. They were going to digitise, but they were going to stay within regional branches under the CBA brand. Now, they are the only bank that actually, in all fairness, have made a commitment not to close any regional branches until 2026. And I think the other banks should follow. But I think we also need to understand technology is coming. And we need to look at alternative solutions. And I think alternative solutions should be looking at licensed post offices in many of these regional communities. And banks should lift the amount that they pay for transactions, but even make capital investment for these licensed post offices to put places where transactions, but also lending interviews can take place in the privacy of the post office, where these communities can still need cash and still have the opportunity to have those services. And I think that's beholden on all the banks to do that and to invest in that. ANZ won't do that at all. And I think I've spoken to Anna Bligh about this to actually do something about it, because regional Australians can't be left behind, but we understand technology is coming. But let's have a sensible solution. Well,
that's it. I mean, there has to be some sort of a solution. Daniel, do you expect that other banks will end up following suit here?
Well, look, in a rare moment of bipartisanship, I'll agree with a lot of what David just said. And the committee that I chair, the House Economics Committee, has been undertaking a review of competition over the last 15 months. And one of the issues that came up with the banks was access to branches. And this is a big issue in the regions, but it's also an issue in communities like mine here in metropolitan Melbourne, where there's a lot of cold communities and a lot of elderly people who actually need to go into a branch. They don't feel comfortable using digital banking. So while the proportion of people in the community using digital services is really high and continues to rise, I think we do need to find solutions for that group of the community for whom that doesn't work. And, you know, the Australia Post option is one option. You know, in some regions, I know that some banks are trialling part-time branches where the staff might be doing back office work for part of the day. There's a few things out there, but I do think this is a policy issue that governments are going to have to grapple with over the next 10 to 20 years in relation to banking, and probably a range of other services too.
Well, that's it. I mean, whether we like it or not, it seems to be the way of the future. Now, the Stage 3 tax cut saga is not quite over yet, with hints today that the Coalition could reinstate the original Stage 3 tax cuts at the next federal election, but keep the revamped 16% tax rate for low-income workers. David, would the Nationals be on board with having another look at the tax package?
Well, the Nationals always support lower taxes for Australians. We think they're better placed to spend their own money, and we should only take what we need to run the services in this country. That's a principle we've held dear. Unfortunately, what happened with removing the Stage 3 tax cuts took away important tax reform that future generations will pay. Those young men and women that are at university today are the ones that will cop this in the neck when they get to work and they climb through the tax brackets, because there'll be more money taken away from them. The Stage 3 tax cut was after first two stages of tax relief was given to lower middle income earners, and there is a cost of living crisis that's been created by Labor in Canberra. And if they wanted to continue on with those Stage 3 tax cuts, they could have, and given temporary and targeted relief, particularly around things like energy, accelerating more relief for energy support for those lower middle income earners, they could have still had that tax reform. So we'll see what happens in the budget, we'll see what mess is left, and then we'll obviously continue to work towards that value and principle that we've stood by as Nationals of trying to return as much money back to Australians in being able to mean that they keep more than they earn. That's just common sense, and that's what the Nationals will continue to prosecute with. And obviously we'll work through that as a tax policy and as an election policy moving forward. But that's been our aspiration for generations, not just now.
Now, GDP figures came out today, and although they were essentially in line with market predictions, they still painted a pretty grim picture. Australia's economy only grew 0.2% over the December quarter, a nominal increase. Daniel, the government's out there today saying this is fantastic, but it's almost flatlining. What do you have to say about that?
So, look, I think that the key thing for me is that the narrow path that we were hoping to walk after we were hit by global inflation 18 months ago was that we wanted to see inflation come down. Monetary policy has been a part of that, and monetary policy was always going to have an impact on aggregate demand. But what we wanted to see was inflation come down, and for the labour market, for unemployment, not to be hit too hard. And what we've found is that inflation has come down from in the low 8s to now being in the low 4s. So we've seen a significant reduction there. But we also have seen unemployment not go up as much as the market would have expected 6 or 12 months ago. So the overall path in terms of how it's affecting people in terms of unemployment is one that I think has been broadly one that is welcome. But also what we're seeing is that real wages are starting to move again. So across all those major measures of what actually matters to people, their real wages, the rate at which people are employed, and also achieving that with inflation coming down, it's a broadly a good set of figures on the macro economy, although there is a ways to go still before inflation gets
What
within
happened
the
to
band.
Labor putting downward pressure, though, on cost of living? I mean, the results show it's getting the opposite of what Labor promised.
Well, so on that, I mean, if you look at if we go back to the tax cuts, I mean, our changes to the Stage 3 tax cuts were revenue neutral, which the Reserve Bank and Treasury have both said won't have an effect on their inflation expectations. But what we see today from the Shadow Assistant Treasurer is a thought bubble, very much in line with what Susan Ley seemed to be saying, of a $40 billion change in the tax position over the forward estimates. Now, really, the onus is on the opposition, rather than just saying we like lower taxes, to explain how would that not be inflationary. 40 billion is huge.
All right, well, we're running out of time, but I just want to get to you, David, because before we go, you've met with farmers in Perth who are very concerned about the phase-out of live sheep exports today. What did they tell you?
Yeah, look, this government doesn't have the courage of their own conviction. The Prime Minister was here a couple of weeks ago and didn't have the courage to go and face up to these farmers and explain the science and the economics around the decision to phase out live sheep. And all we're doing is exporting animal welfare standards to countries like Ethiopia and Sudan, who have less standards than us. They are morally bankrupt in thinking that we are going to improve animal welfare standards globally because we do them best here in this country and we set the standard. And so what we're hearing from these farmers today is the actual economic trauma that is ripping across their kitchen tables now because the investment confidence has been shattered. This government won't even hand over a report that shows why they've done it. And yet these people are being left to see their whole industry destroyed, but their income's destroyed. Now, what government does that to their own Australian people when there is an opportunity to continue on with the trade that needs to continue? You can't process them here. This is a cultural issue where these countries want live sheep, so they're processed in country. And it's arrogant and ignorant of this government to think that these Middle Eastern countries do not want live sheep. So if we don't do them, someone else will.
It's a really tough topic, I've got to say, one that certainly needs some debating. David Littleproud, David Merlino, we have to leave it there. Thank you so much for joining us this evening.